So let's talk about React components. We're going to play around with them a bit. I'm sure this stage of the journey, most of you know how to create components, but let's talk about different strategies. So first of all, I got here my code flicks. I've removed a few lines of code. So at the moment, it looks very simple, right? So we got the gallery with just a text on the right-hand side. Yeah, nothing very exciting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component as you already know. That's the starting point. So I'm going to create a new file. So the new file is going to be hello. So I'm going to create a hello component, hello.js. And in here, I'm going to import React from React, and then export default function hello that return div with a title hello workshop, right? So you know that now what do we need to do? Import. Thank you. Import what?
Hello.
Yep.
From.
Yep.
Hello. And you can leave off the J.
Yep. Cheers. And how do we use hello now?
Hello.
Correct. Thank you, Aaron. Something like that, right? It doesn't work. Right, because it probably created on the wrong folder. Exactly. That's my fault. You see, I said that hello is in the same folder as the gallery, but I, by mistake, created it somewhere else. So now they are like sibling files, and you see that it works, right? So if let me close few files here, so otherwise it's going to be confusing. So we don't care, we don't care, we don't care. Yeah. So here's the gallery and the hello. If we change something. Oh, is this guy? Oh, that happened to someone yesterday as well, right? I don't know what's going on here. Sometimes the path gets automatically changed. It shouldn't happen. Hello. Oh God. Oh God, look at that. That's terrible. That got changed. I didn't want to do that. Right. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to discard changes. Yeah, that should be quite easy. Just give me a second. I'll be with you shortly. So we got the hello, we got the gallery, right? So I'm going to again get rid of that bit. I'm going to import hello from hello. Here you go. And then I can display hello. Here you go, right? So we know that already. If you don't remember, or you don't know anything about what I did, please have a look to the first workshop we did last week about React. Right. But now I'm going to make that a little bit more complicated. So this is okay when we want to create simple components. When I mean simple, what simple means? Obviously, this is not very scientists, right? Because simple may depend on everyone. But I mean, if we just want to display a piece of code like that, this is okay. However, sometimes we want to keep states. You will see, I think it's task number 13, that we'll start introducing a state. So when we talk about the state in React, we are talking about data model. When we want that component, hello component, to host its own data model, to host objects, to host arrays, to host these kind of things, right? If we want to do that, unfortunately, we cannot rely on this kind of a structure. This is not going to work. So we need to change the approach a bit. I'm sure you're already familiar, or at least you've seen things like the render method, right? I'm sure you've seen that, like classes, these kind of things. So this is the strategy we have to follow if we want to create stateful components. So what I'm going to do now I'm going to change the hello component. I'm going to refactor it to be ready to manage a data model. So look at the changes. I'm going to create a class with the same name, so we don't need to change that. And that class needs to extend. We'll talk about what extends means. But for now, you need to know that that has to extend React.component. So in other words, we are telling JavaScript that this class will be a React component. So in here, now, we are expected to add at least a method called render, and that render method should return whatever we want. So hello workshop from a class.
Does it have to have that React dot component? Or can't it just be extended?
Yeah, correct. So there are two options here. So maybe what you have seen is that instead of doing extend React.component, some people add a comma on the import of React, and then you can directly import the component variable. So you do that, that's exactly the same thing. You see?
There's no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, there is literally no difference. I particularly prefer that one because I find it slightly simpler and easier to read, but very personal. So just follow whatever approach you prefer. Right, so at this stage of the journey, I've done nothing. I just changed from a functional stateless component to a class stateful component. So we're talking about state. But what the state is, let's add a state, because at the moment we don't have any state, right? So let's add a state. So state is a reserved word in React. So state is usually an object that holds all the properties for that component. I'll give you an example. So we can declare something called constructor. So constructor is a function that will be automatically called by React every time we initialize a component. So this will be automatically called. So if in here, the first thing we need to do is we need to call super. You don't need to understand why. We'll talk about that at the end of the bootcamp, but just do it. And then we can create our state object. So how do we initialize our state object? So we can do something like that. This.state, this is an object. It's just an object, a plain object, right? So in here, we can define as many properties as we want, just an object. You know how objects work. So for instance, let's just start my username. This is a valid state. So do you know how to display my username here? Not actually. So remember that we want to use we are going to use a variable, because this is a variable, right? This is an object. To use variables, remember we... No, we don't need a string. No. So string literals are useful when you have a JavaScript function and you want to return a string. However, this is markup. This is HTML. I'll format it a bit to make it more readable for you. Something like that. Right? That's a slightly more readable, right? Actually, you can get rid of the H1. Let's get some extra space. Here you go. So if I want to access the state from the UI, the only thing I need to do is open and close curly brackets, and then do this dot state dot username. Thank you. Username. That's it, right? That's it. So if I save the changes, that's it. This is the way we initialized the state. Obviously, sometimes we want to change the state. right? Because otherwise this is not very powerful. What happens if we want to do something and after a while we want to change the state? We can do that. For instance, I'm going to add a button. So when I click on the button, I'm going to change my username. Right? This will be a good example to see also how to interact with our view. Right, so let's see how to do that. I'm going to change the font size. Yeah, cool. Right, so to do that, first of all, let me add a button at the bottom with some text. Click me to change text, to change username. You see, we got the button. If you want, we can add a div to make it more readable, blah, blah, blah. You know all these things already. Right? Here is the button. So the goal here is whenever I click on the button, I want to change the username. So look at how can we proceed. This is relatively simple. I want to capture the click event because I want to click.
So you would put on click.
On click. Cheers, that's it, Tamani. So here I can do on click equals curly brackets, right? And now, so this will receive a function, so I can just open the function, close it, and then I can invoke the function that I want to call. So for instance, if I create a new function here called change username, so I can call that function doing this dot change username. So whenever you do that, if I click on the button, it will call that function. Let's have a look. At the moment, it's very hard to see whether I'm right or not because there is nothing here. There is no action. So let's do something. Let's add a console log, or let's add an alert, which is very aggressive. So this will show a pop-up, a very ugly pop-up in the middle of the screen. You see? It's hard to read, but yeah, it says yes to click it. So that's a way to prove that we can interact with our React components, right? So now what I want to do, I don't want to show a very disgusting alert message. I want to change the username. In other words, I want to change the state. How do we change the state on React in real time? Set the state, correct. So React gives us a function called set state. So within that function, we need to tell, hey, okay, you want to change the state, but which property do you want to change? The username. That's the name of the property we want to change. And what is the new value of the username? So that's whatever you want. Peter, for example, right? So if I do that, I expect, look at my name. As soon as I click on the button, my name should change to Peter. That's it. This is how it works. 2 steps. First of all, we initialize the state, and then whenever we want to change it, we call the set state function. Questions?
What? I forgot. How? There's a way of making the button somewhat invisible, or like
Invisible.
yeah.
Why you want to make the
I don't
button?
know, just like have it look neater, I guess.
I mean, yeah, but that's about CSS. So we'll talk about how to hide buttons and these kind of things. Right? Yeah, let's not mix things, Tamani, because otherwise it will be very confusing.
Ricardo, can I just ask, do you know we've changed username this
Yep.
Yeah.
that stays within that export default class hello and React component, isn't it? It's within that.
Yeah.
You couldn't write that bit at the bottom of the render, could you?
No.
It won't work that way,
No,
so it
no.
has to be in-
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So whenever we want to change the state, we should do that as part of a function that we create here, right? Yeah, that's it.
And what does this refers to? Is it
Yeah,
refers to the React
object.
components hello
Yeah.
or the parent?
so this refers to the class. How do we know that? Remember that example. So when we call this dot change username, it will look for a method here called change username, which is here, and that's why it works, right? So I'm going to change that example a bit. What happened if instead of username, we want to host first name and last name? In other words, I want to change that. Is that valid? Can we initialize an object on the state?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So state is an object. You know that we could have nested objects. So that could be perfectly valid, right? So user could be at the same time another object. So here we could have the first name and the last name, right? What do we need to change now? First of all, to display my first name and my last name. What again, sir? Take Peter. No, ignore that. I want, sorry, ignore that. I just want to display.
That's the change.
Yeah.
To display, you need to go up under hello workshop.
Yeah,
class.
here. This.state.user, like that?
No.
No? No? Yes,
Uh,
no?
User dot first name.
Correct. User is an object, right? So if I try to display the object,
Nothing really happens.
look, objects are not valid as a React child component. We cannot display an object because an object is not user-friendly readable by definition. So we need to decide, okay, that's an object. Which property do you want to display? First of all, first name, and then the last name.
This got changed, just last name.
Last name. And that's it, right? Something I could recommend you, because sometimes you will see that you keep typing this.state hundreds of times, and you know it's even hard to read, right? There is a lot of boilerplating code here. So what I like to do is whenever I know that, for instance, I will interact lots of times with the user, at the beginning of the render function, you can declare a user variable. So you can do let user equals this.state.user. So now we can simplify a bit our markup, you see? And it still works. And then how do we change now the name when I click on the button?
Change username function needs to be rewritten
So, right, so
so that username doesn't exist anymore.
correct,
So that you have to call in from the constructor user
okay,
dot this state user
this.state.user,
yes.
yeah,
Can't see. Yeah, the
dot first name,
first name.
yeah,
But then you have to add the new value.
yeah,
A new new value.
yeah,
Because whoever you want to call it.
something like that.
Yeah.
Do we need that?
Yeah. Yes.
No,
Yes, no, yes, no.
because that's Peter all the time.
But that's, you need to set the state.
And what do you set
You are
here?
changing the state.
Right, so what do we change here?
You have to copy paste it, which is on top into that because you are changing. Well, you are changing first name right now.
Yeah,
You said the first name.
Yeah.
Not just first name. I'm not sure.
right, so this doesn't work in that way. This is kind of optimistic, but unfortunately
Yeah,
React
but
doesn't like that.
Yeah, I realized that.
So the thing is, we want to change the user object, right? So, okay, let's start from the beginning. We want to change the user object. So we say, which property do we want to change? We want to change the user, right?
Yeah.
And what's the value of user? Then that's fine. Let's rewrite our user, right?
Oh,
First name, Peter, last name, Murphy. Something like that. So if I'm correct now, user will be replaced by this one. It's important to notice that,
tricky question.
yeah. Every time we call setState, React will automatically rerun the render function. That's why the UI will update automatically. Let's see if that's the case. You see, it works. Let's add a breakpoint. Let's add a couple of breakpoints and see how this works. I will also add a few breaklines to make this more readable. Here you go. Right, so I'm going to add some breakpoints. I would like you to start getting familiar with breakpoints because this is a very powerful mechanism, especially the one that comes with Chrome DevTools. So right, I got my hello component. I'm going to add a breakpoint on every method, and you are going to tell me the execution sequence. So look, I dropped 3 breakpoints. Line number 7, line number 16, and line number 25. So, first of all, when I refresh the page, so which breakpoints will be triggered and in which order? 26, 25, so 25 first, and then what? The first one, 7, and then 16. So you think that if I refresh, it will first render 25, then it will render 7, and then it will render 16. 7 and 25. Okay, so the question is, which thing will run first, the constructor or the render? It will render first. Well, let's see. I'll show you.
It's got to know what to render first, isn't
No, I disagree. Because the first thing we want to do is we want to construct. We want to prepare. In other words,
it? Oh, yeah.
the constructor is the very first thing that will be triggered when we create our component. Here you go. So Norbert was right. First, we trigger the constructor. Then you said that it should be 25. Correct. And then, will number 16 be triggered?
It depends if it's found the name, isn't it?
It depends.
Yeah, because if it's found Ricardo,
Yep.
why would it's not going to bother going to the other one, is it?
So this line will never be triggered at rendering time. Exactly. Why? Because who is forcing the call to that function? When is this function going to be called? Correct. Correct. This function will only be invoked if we press on the ugly button in the middle of the screen. Here you go. So what will happen next? Will any other breakpoint will be triggered after this one? Exactly. Remember, every time we change the state, it will call render again. So if I click again, we call render. And further on, if we inspect the value, user is already pointing to the updated value because we have just changed it a second ago. Make sense? Right? Any question?
You have a question, don't you? I'll ask it.
I'm going to do the last thing for today, which is a very common exercise. So I'm going to transform user, a single user, into an array of users, right? Because we want to display multiple users. So let's keep it simple. Let's forget about objects. So assuming we got an array of users, so you know how to declare an array, right? Thank you. So few names here. We got Mary, we got Louis, and we got Peter, right? Yes, 3 names. So you are going to tell me how to display these 3 guys in my component. In here. How do we do that? Square brackets, user. So first of all, we want to access the users array. We want to access the variable.
We do it for each link.
For each. What's the first thing we need to do when we want to access a variable in React? Curly brackets. That's the first thing. And then, right. So we want essentially to display all these 3 names, right? In other words, we want to transform an array, this one, into another array of HTML elements, like H1, H2, H3. Do you remember which method?
Map.
Exactly. Remember, map is the most important thing you are probably going to learn in this bootcamp. So please master it. That's extremely important. So every time we want to transform an array of something into an array of something else, use map. In other words, I want to access my array, so this will be this.state dot what? Users, thank you. What else? Map, thank you. And then what do I receive here? User, correct. So this will be a callback function that will be executed how many times? 3 times, because we have 3 users, right? That's it. So here we are saying, hey, have a look to this is plural, have a look to this array of users, and then for each user, what I want to do is I'm going to return a hello message. So look, we can transform an array of strings into an array of HTML tags. So I can do something like that, h3, and then just said hello user. Let's see if that makes any sense. Look at that. You can ignore the error for now, but look at that. So again, we have replaced an array of 3 strings with an array of 3 HTML elements. That's extremely important in React world, be able to transform array of data into array of HTML stuff. Questions?
No, like that, it's really easy to understand. It's just when you're reading some examples and then trying to go on your own, it's really difficult. But like that, it's simple.
It's simple. It's not complicated at all. And then,
for me, it's mainly learning where all the brackets and everything go. Like why?
it's, yeah, but the brackets, yeah, it's.
Why did you just open those 2 brackets there? What was that for?
Yeah, so every time you are using a render function, And instead of doing pure HTML like href, like div, or br, instead of doing pure HTML, you want to do React thingy, like access a state, access a variable, you need to surround that expression with curly brackets.
Okay. So we will just start a new one and we'll surround the new one in new brackets.
Yep, correct. Yeah. So in other words, I could even display the length of the array at the bottom. Look, I can open that again, and I can simply do this.state.users.length, right? You see?
Yeah.
So every time you want to display something on the UI, and the source of that information is a React variable surrounded by curly brackets. That's it.
Why is it necessary, by the way?
Why?
It's just
Because look at what happened if I remove the brackets. Look, if I remove the brackets, do you think what will display? What will happen? Look at what I did. I'm removing all the brackets. So first of all, yeah, Visual Studio is complaining. You see this is red already. But purely talking about the length, do you think what this will display?
pure text.
Exactly.
Because it's not a
Exactly.
points to a variable.
That's it. If you don't use the curly brackets, it will be read as pure text, right? Like hello or whatever. We don't want that. We want to process that piece of code. That's why we surround it by curly brackets. Any questions? So please try this example until your fingers start bleeding, because this is the most important thing you are going to learn in this bootcamp. So just one subtle thing. You will notice that every time you create this kind of a structure with React, you get an error. Look at the console. This is because React needs some additional information. Every time we want to display an array of elements, like here, React is telling you, that's fine, I'll do it, it works. However, please, you need to give me additional information, because otherwise I won't be able to manage that array efficiently. So how do we do that? We just need, look, to add a unique key property to the root element of our array. So what's the root element of our array? Is the href or the div? The div, exactly.
You just put it in another div and that's it.
You don't need to add another div, you just need to add a property to that existing div called key equals, and that should be a unique property. So what property is unique? Index. That's a good point, but what is the index? How can we get the index? After user, correct. Remember that the map function can receive multiple arguments. The first one will be always the first H element of the array, but we can add another element, which is the index, right? So if we do that, then we can set that the key is the index, because it will be always unique. Index will be 0, then it will be 1, then it will be 2. So if I save that, the error should disappear. Exactly, it's gone.
Where is this? Oh, yeah, okay. We had this in the previous example.
Mm-hmm.
Indexing.
Yep.
Does it always exist in the map method only?
No.
Other.
Map exists on for each, and that's it. For each. So if you are using for each, it can also access the index. Last question. How do I amend my change username function? Now it's going to be Look at the example. It's going to be change usernames. No, change username actually. So that function, you're going to tell me how to do it. This will be the very last exercise for today. It's going to receive two arguments, name of the new name of the user, and then the index. Will it replace the first one? Will it replace the second one? Or will it replace the third one? So in here, when we call change username, we could do Anthony to replace Luis. You see what I'm trying to do? So I want Luis. Exactly, exactly. So how do we do that? What do we need to do here?
Can you stand the window so that we can see the code?
Yeah. You're going to make it larger or smaller?
No, just
Shrink it.
You just go users and then the brackets put 1 and
Users, 1
yeah, and then
equals
and then put the name.
the name,
Person that you want.
new name. Should that be index instead of 1 to make it dynamic? What's that? What users is? Where is users? Where do we have a variable or any import called users? So Aaron is suggesting to do something like that. d.state.users set state. Okay, right. So this dot set state, and then what? User dot new name
what? There's no
index
and it's not
dot index bracket index.
No,
there is user.
it can't be in bracket.
So you can see that's why Visual Studio is so good, right? Because it's complaining all the time. Whatever you propose is like, I don't want to do that, right? That looks weird. That looks weird. So I'll tell you how to proceed. Originally, we saw how to fully replace the state, right? We got first name, we replace it. We got this user, we replace it. But sometimes we don't want to replace the entire state. We just want to change a subtle property somewhere, right? So I'll tell you, this is easier than it looks like. So let's start from the beginning. It's literally 3 steps. The first step is just tell me what the state, what the current list of users is. So I'm going to create a new variable, let users equals this.state.users. So this is the current state, an array of 3 strings. Now, the second step is I can amend whatever property I want. In that specific case, users index could be 0, 1, or 2 equals new name. And finally, I can override the original state. So I can do this.setState users equals users. That's it. We get the state, we change it, and we persist it.
How can you acquire, or how can we acquire this logical knowledge, like logical thinking, so that be better at to break up problem several different steps? How can you do that? How can you be there?
Practice. Let's practice. Let's practice. So you see, let's see what happened now. So if I refresh the browser, here you go. Anthony got replaced. If instead of Anthony, I want to replace Peter, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? I want Peter to be transformed into Anthony.
So you change
The number.
to 2.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if that works. Perfect. It works, right? So we have created a good method because it's quite dynamic. We can change whatever name here in whatever position. Questions? I'm not going to do anything else today. So if you have any questions? No?
It's just
All clear? So again, please watch the video and repeat it. You keep asking questions that prove that you are not watching the videos. So you need to watch the videos and you need to practice, right? Because grasping this is just about literally repeating what I've done. This is one of the most complicated things you are going to do. You can see that it's not the end of the world, right? It's just a few principles, create a constructor function, set the state, using curly brackets. That's it, right? Practice. Cool? Right, that was it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.